Copco that you were talking about was most interesting to me because I hadn't heard any of this ever in any of the interviews. Maybe someone else has, but I haven't. What about the changes that happened here? You like the changes, or which do you like and which don't you like?
Well, I certainly like the change in our lifestyle, because if we had to be back where we were in 1931 or 32, we wouldn't be able to live that way. We couldn't do it. You understand what I mean? Without any money, and you'd have to hammer out a living right out of the woods. We were too old. We couldn't do it.
Well, no one could do it unless they'd been trained to do it, because
There's so many regulations now too. You couldn't do it anyway.
Yeah.
Oh no.
But you see, both of our families were people who were taught to cope, and that's the only reason we could do it. We didn't think there was any other way. We
didn't know any other way.
And I don't regret one thing about my life. I wouldn't change it.
No, I wouldn't change your life either. It sounds terrific.
We have lived in a wonderful time from the horse and buggy days, and I mean horse and buggy, to the atomic age.
Do you remember seeing your first airplane? When was that? When did you see your first airplane?
When did we go out in that field out there?
Well, I don't know if that's, I can't remember for sure, but they did have an air show, and they had 4 planes there, didn't they, that time?
There were 3 planes that lit in that field, and that was, I don't know.
It must have been about 19. It's good. He was born in 1900. And you see, if you can remember about how old you were, you must have been at that time, you must have been about 16, 17 years old.
I was going to say 15 or 16, maybe 16.
Yeah.
About 1916. And then if we'd seen one after that, well, it was a curiosity, you know. Yeah.
And I can remember the first car I ever saw,
Tell
too.
me.
And, it was owned by a man named Hodson here in Bedford.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a roadster. It just had, in that old Hodson.
Side crank, yeah, no top. No
And just
nothing.
one seat, or just
One seat.
2 seats in the front, you know.
Just for 2 people.
And there wasn't any top on it, and it went by our place when we lived there, and on that Rogue River Road, about a mile and a half this side of Shady Cove. And it went by, and we all saw it go by. How far was it from that front gate of ours to where we had a
Well, it wasn't
porch
as
on
far
the
as it is now, was it?
No.
It was 50 yards, probably.
Yeah, not over 50 yards.
Well, as much dust as you said you had around there, and it was a roadster, I imagine it got kind of dirty.
Oh,
back there.
everybody did.
Oh, yeah, everybody had to wear what they call a linen duster, you know, with their clothes.
And that was thrilling, and I don't really remember the first airplane I ever saw, but we went out. There was, see, who went to that with that group?
Orange was in the bunch.
Yeah, my brother Orange and my cousin Sanford Houston.
Yeah.
And you.
Yeah.
And Enid,
Yeah.
his sister, was along. And
That's the old Ish place. That's the Von der Helen place. You know where it is.
we came down
And
here,
lived in
and
that
we
field.
stayed all night in Medford. And Enid and I stayed at the old that hotel, Medford Hotel, and you and Sanford and Ord stayed over
At the Nash.
at the Nash Hotel.
That's where Robinson's is now.
And my cousin always told me everything. So the next day, he told me about how those guys were cutting up there at that hotel. We saw him, happened to meet him on the street. And so then I had something on the boys. They just cut up and nearly got ordered out of their room and slapped each other with wet towels. And my cousin told me about it. So. We kidded the rest of them about it. That we said that we'd heard them up there. That they didn't know where we'd stayed, and we said there was somebody just tearing up the place. And they looked at each other and winked because they knew they were the culprits, but they didn't know that we knew.
In 1905, my mother came to Medford, and I came along, of course. And, of course, it was a sightseeing job for me. And we saw 5 automobiles and 3 trains. And I thought I'd seen the whole world, you know. The trains ran through here at that time and did, and for a long time after. But automobiles was a scarce article.
No gas stations either, I don't imagine. No filling stations in this area at all, nothing. Filling.
Oh, no. No, that makes me think of something. The guy that had this house built, Charlie Furnace, Lucas, and Long had the first service station in Medford on the corner of Riverside and Main Street, where that vacant lot is right there. That was the first service station. Up until that time, the stores, the hardware stores or something, they would have a gas pump that sat on the curb and you could drive up there. That was the first service station in Medford.
What year was that?
Well, they were there in 1918, and I think that they'd been there a couple of years.
All right, either one of you, what's your happiest memory and your unhappiest memory?
I don't know how to answer that. I think that my happiest time in my life actually was back when we were having it rough and the kids were little. And we enjoyed life, both of us did.
I think my happiest memory is when I started to school, when I was 6 years old. I enjoyed, I liked to be around people and go places, and school was just like heaven to me. I think I enjoyed that more than anything that I can remember.
How about unhappiest memories?
I don't know. I've had some pretty rough times. A lot of sickness in my lifetime. She's been healthy as a horse, but
That ought to make you
I've
happy.
felt pretty blue sometimes. And had a lot of trouble. Still kicking around. That's the funny part.
Anything you want to share on that, or?
My troubles?
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you an idea. In 1925, I had pleural effusion, and they took nearly 5 quarts of fluid out of my right side. And, of course, I wasn't supposed to live, but I did.
What caused that?
Nobody knows. It's just wasn't in the lung. It was on the outside of the lung.
He was fishing and wading a lot.
Yeah, I
And
think
it
that
might have he might have been caused from a cold in the pleura of the lining of the lung.
And then after we moved down here, I had a aneurysm. And
I'm surprised you're still with us.
they had in this big artery that goes down. They put a piece in that, and then one in each where it branches off into the legs. And I was on the operating table 6.5 hours. They took 93 stitches. They just darn near cut me in 2.
I understand that's pretty tricky surgery too, that they just almost take you out and gut you, and you're very, very sore after.
My intestines were laying in a little plastic bag alongside
That's what I
of me.
hear.
Yeah, and then I've suffered a heart attack. I've had everything in God's world, I guess. Acute nephritis.
What's that?
Well, I had my tonsils taken out when I was 36 years old, I believe. And streptococcus germ got into that, or the tonsil, and they settled in my kidneys. And that happens so quickly that if they had happened to settle, my heart would have killed me right away. But I had a rough time, but I made it through that. And I was supposed to lay flat on my back for 6 months, never get up, really. but I didn't. And I've had everything else, measles and whooping cough.
You haven't had anything, is that right, Eula?
Oh, yeah, I've had it, but nothing ever hit me hard. I just went to bed and that was it.
That's a blessing and unusual too. I
Well,
would think.
I remember I had the measles. I'm not telling this for a bad tragedy or anything, but I was down at Central Point. I think I told you none of us had the measles at home, and I just, they came in and looked at me and she said, I didn't know what was the matter with me, and the woman I was staying with didn't either, but some people had the measles, and he said, she's broke out like a peach. And in 10 days, I was out back working. But I just broke out, and that was it. And I've had a lot of it, flu and things like that, but I get right over it. I don't think of anything else, it's just the way I am.
Do you have any idea why?
Why I'm that way?
Yeah, why?
I guess because I don't worry. I don't know why.
That's interesting about not worrying. Finish this one side up. I guess we want to. I hope I have. Yeah, this is a new tape, isn't it, here? Maybe, are you people getting tired? We're almost to the end. I could send out
No.
2 tapes here. Have you a philosophy of life either one of you'd like to share? That's a wide open one. You can think a while on that.
Philosophy of life. Does that mean, are you afraid of disaster, afraid to live, or?
Oh, like do unto others as you would have do unto yourself. If you something that is.
Yes, I think we both do. I believe in leaving people alone and letting people, as long as they don't tread on my toes, I don't care what people do. The only thing that bothers me about that is the way some people treat their children. That's the only thing.
I think that, as far as I'm concerned, my philosophy is we're all the same. I don't care what color they are either. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't make any difference to me. I know colored people that I think a lot of, and I'm just like, see, I think you noticed that no soliciting sign on the wall out there, and I like to be left alone. I don't bother anybody else.
That's about it.
Well, look, that now, like that color thing, my great uncles, my grandfather's brothers, all fought with the South in the Civil War. But if my grandfather had any enmity toward the colored people, I've never heard him say it. And in that book, they had slaves. Some of his grandfather had slaves, but they treated them like family. And when they got sick, they doctored them just the same. It was just that they were in the South, and the Negroes were a responsibility to them. They took care of them just like you would anything that was sick.
My father was in the North. He wasn't in the siege of Atlanta, but he was in the march from Atlanta to the sea.
And I had those great uncles, 3 of them fought all through the Civil War. They were in the Battle of Gettysburg, and but none of them were ever in a prison, in a northern prison. But that's a whole long story.
Way back there.
Yes. Does that seem like a long time ago?
It does to me. Do you remember any stories? Did they ever tell you any stories about fighting that battle of Gettysburg? Or
Yes.
what did they have to say about it?
Well, they said it was just chaos. They said that there was just people getting shot down right by the side of them. And when they first had a certain kind of gun that had a lot of power to it, and they said that to turn those guns, they'd cut oak trees that big around off. And if it shot into a group of men, why, they were just scattered all wounded and hurt, but they happened to not be in the range. 3 of them, they came out here in 1903, and they told us all about what was going on there in that war, because I wouldn't go to bed as long as they sat and talked. And
So you heard all their stories.
I heard all their stories, what happened. But they were Democrats, and they never changed. My grandfather said he'd vote for a Republican if he saw a good one, but he didn't ever see a good one. No, they weren't prejudiced in any way. They never talked about politics, mean about anybody. They just went and did, like I said, their philosophy was to live and let live. And it went all the way back to the whole family.
Fred, you were talking a little bit earlier about the Tuckers that had Tucker Snowcat.
Yes.
Well, both Eula grew up with the Tuckers, is that correct?
No, not exactly grew up. I knew.
Well, I grew up in the same neighborhood, 5 miles from where they grew up.
You never went to the same school with them.
No. I did go up there and visit with them once in a while.
Oh.
They had boys my age.
What about, you said earlier about the Tucker family had a hard time? What was that you said? I can't remember.
No, I don't think I said that. I think that the Tucker family got along pretty good, I think, because they had a good ranch there, and
I don't know.
But the boys were clever, you know what I mean? They were mechanically inclined, and they seemed to be ambitious.
I don't know a thing about their background, where they came from
either.
when they came up there.
I don't either.
But I know they were well thought of family, but they didn't enter into community. They weren't raised right on the land like we were, you know.
No, they had a couple of daughters, Iva and Ethel, and I know that I don't remember about Iva, but I know Ethel attended the dances in the neighborhood, and I don't know if the boys did or not. I believe they did.
I don't know, because
Jess did, I think, Jess Tucker.
they may have, but they never did any place. Now, I knew Ethel. She used to stop there, and we played together. We were the same age, but and they'd stop as they'd go to town. We lived on that road, main road between where they lived and Medford, and they'd stop in there every time they came by, and we played together, and they were very likable. And Ethel Tucker was anyway my age, but I didn't go to school with them, and I never did go to any place with them, like dances and parties and things.
Well, which Tucker was it that had the Tucker Snowcat?
Emmett.
And was he a pretty tough businessman, or you said, I mentioned to you about when he went to a doctor's office and he sent the doctor a bill, and you said that sounded like him.
That I think was like Emmett Tucker, because I don't think that he was, you mentioned a tough businessman. I don't think he was unreasonable, no. In fact, I liked Emmett Tucker. I think
really
he
well.
was.
I don't know how he made as much money. I remember when he was trying to get some snowcat or snow sled he had first on the market. I don't know anything about their financial status at all. But he came up by Prospect there and asked us to come on up and watch that sled operate. And we went up to Crater Lake, and he had that first sled.
We rode on it.
What year was that, do you suppose?
Oh, gosh, I wonder. It was after we were married.
Oh yeah, several years,
Probably 1925, maybe.
something like that.
How about his brothers, and how were they? You liked Emmett.
I can't tell you very much about his brothers after they grew up, but one of them lived here in Medford. Old Tucker did, and everybody thought well of old Tucker.
But what did he
And,
do for a living? I don't know.
He mined, as far as I knew, that he was interested in mining gold.
And all the old
And
people, miners and them, they all knew him. And he lived on West Main, right off of West Main, not far from us, and we came by here. But he never did come over to our house. But after we moved down here, Emmett came by several
oh
times.
yes, and then I would go out. Emmett always asked me to come out to the shop, you know, and I went out myself.
He was really a self-made man, wasn't he?
You bet he was.
They were all
Yes,
of
they
them.
all
Whatever
were.
they did it on their own. And we
Yeah.
met Clay, wasn't that one of Emmett's
Clay and,
brothers up at
Otto.
Prospect?
The Clay and Otto were close to my age,
Yeah.
and I have a scar. I guess it's still there on the back of my head where one of them, we were wrestling, and one of them threw me down, and I hit my head on a rock and cut a gash in the back of my head. And that showed for a year. I guess it doesn't show anymore. I don't know. I can't see back there.
I think the parents, the Tucker parents, I don't think they mixed with the people, you know, these old timers that lived around. Homesteaders, I guess you'd call them, like my parents.
I never knew of it. No.
Were they farmers too?
Emmett's
Family?
father was a farmer. Yes,
Farmer.
they had that ranch with the stone houses, you know.
Oh, that
The
was
Obstinate J Ranch.
something about the stone house you said earlier. That isn't.
They
wasn't-
built it
They built the stone
Yeah.
house.
on the Obstinate J Ranch, you know, right below right below Casey's camp a little way.
If the house is still there?
Oh,
Oh,
yes,
yes, yes.
just beautiful home. And they built, did the Tuckers build that garage?
No, that was a dairy barn, and the people that came from Iowa out there, said people came out here and bought that, and they flew the cattle for the dairy barn. They flew those cattle out here from Iowa.
We went to dances up there then, that was after Tuckers left.
Oh yes, the Tuckers, I think, built that little garage that they had the dances in.
Yeah, I
Yes,
went
but
to dances in that garage. Were
Yeah.
the Tuckers there then?
Enyarts were
Enyarts
there.
bought it,
How
yeah.
do you spell that?
Enyart.
Right.
Enyart.
Enyart.
And that's of course long gone, whatever it was.
Oh, I don't, yes, that was a long time before we were married. It's been over 60
Oh
years.
yes, yes.
You know,
Sometime.
this is August 21st.
Mhm.
Is that right? And we're continuing this interview. All right, now you took your first time you took your teacher's exam?
Yes, I had gone to school. I went to school out at Shady Cove all my life. And when I got to be 18, I didn't know what in the world I was going to do. When I got to be 18, I had to do something. So I started in studying school law and theory and practice of teaching, different subjects. And when I got through with my last term of school, I'd passed the 8th grade quite a while before, but I went on this year or two and just studied the same subjects like arithmetic, that you have to teach the same things, you know. And I took that examination. I got ahead of myself. We lived out there. It's about, I guess it's 18 or 20 miles from Central Point. And I had a sister living there and at Central Point. So I got a ride down to Central Point, and they had a horse and a buggy. And they hitched that horse up for me, and I drove over to Jacksonville. And I'd already registered for teacher's examination. And I think we spent 2 days there taking examinations, and I passed and got my teacher's certificate. And each day I drove over there until I finished that day's examinations. And I met so many people who were doing the same thing. That was in 1912. This happened. And some of the people who were taking it had finished high school, and were just going over there to get their teacher's certificate, and some had done like I did, just studied at private school.
And that was the county seat, and that was where you went to?
Yeah, that's where we
get
had
the-
to go to take the examination, and the first one I took was in the courthouse, and the next ones I took was in the old Jacksonville public school out of, you know, where, maybe you don't know, I guess you do though, you're
Just tell
acquainted
me.
with Jacksonville.
Not that very well.
Well, I think it's a school they're considering tearing down now. I've heard about it. It's out, I believe, I don't know directions very well. I believe it's a little bit north and east of town. And I drove out there. It's on a hill, kind of a hill, and it was a 2-story building. And in one of the classrooms, all those teachers were taking those examinations. We took them every 2 years.
You drove from Central Point, you must have gone right by the Hanley farm.
I knew the Hanleys. Yes, and I went right by the farm. And I knew the girls. There was one of the Hanley girls about my age. And I've been there quite a few times. I knew Clara Hanley was,
Did it surprise you that those girls didn't get married?
it did, but they were so happy with their family. They had such a wonderful family that I think usually people want to have a different life than they've had before when they get married. I don't know that's the reason, but they always seem so happy with their family. See, this one, Mary Hanley, lived with her aunt, Claire Hanley. I knew that were the ones that I knew the best. And yes, we drove by there.
I was going to get in onto both of your brothers and sisters on both sides and what happened to them and so forth. But before I do, between last week and this week, have either one of you thought of things you'd like to add that we didn't get into?
I haven't thought much about it. We've
Haven't
been
thought
so
much
busy
yet.
all.
I'm busy doing something else, but I haven't thought of it.
One of the things that I have told a lot of people was about the fact that you've never taken a driver's license test. I've
Yes.
told that to quite a few people because that intrigued me. Because of you just
It
had it
just
renewed
seems like
every
it's
year.
so far back, doesn't it, to you?
Well, I think it's really a good story.
It costs 25 cents, and that does, sent to Salem.
But now, if you want to start in on those brothers and sisters, Fred has been talking about his quite a bit lately. Maybe he could start on his.
Okay, Fred, start off.
Well, hold
Here,
that
you
thing
come
just
over
a minute.
here.
Let me get that number 2 book out of there.
You had quite a few siblings, it looks like here.
I don't know all about my family either. Did you write down the name of my father in there? Eula Middlebusher?
Information, Eula Middlebusher, you
No,
have it
it's
down here.
L-E-W-I-S. You got it, L-E-W-I-S.
Uh-huh,
It's L-O-U-I-S.
L-O-U-I-N.
Yeah, I was glad we got to looking at different things that we had around here and found that out.
More of a French spelling on that. Okay,
You want me to name the older ones from down the line?
uh-huh, and what happened to them, and what do you know about them, and so forth?
I better sit over there, because I remembered some of it that he
Yeah.
did not remember.
Willie was the oldest, and he died when he was 18 in Kansas. And that's all I know. And Pearl was the next one that died in Kansas. And I don't know how old she was. And Clarence was the next one. Born December the 24th in 1880, and he died when he was 75.
Okay, but that would be
1955 you had down here.
Yes, 1955.
And he,
Then Elva,
What did he do for a living? And was he back in Kansas also?
he was born in Kansas, but he was here after 1895. He came here with folks. And he was, before he died, he was, worked for the Department of the Interior in the Indian Service. Up until that time, he'd just been a laborer, logging woods or
Here he worked around in this area. He worked for the Indian Service
at Klamath.
in Klamath.
Mhm.
And did he marry and have children then?
He married, but he had no children.
No children.
Married when he was,
late in life.
yes, in his 50s sometime.
And so he worked kind of on the reservation over there,
Yes,
probably, in
yes.
Klamath
Mhm.
Reservation.
Mhm.
Okay.
Elva was the next, and I don't know how old she was. She was born in Kansas, and I don't know how old she was when she passed away.
Or do you know who she married? Oh,
Yes.
she was. She came here. She lived
Yes,
here, didn't she?
yes, and then she married Cleve Storm in 1909 or 10, about 9 or 10.
Like
And they moved-
STORM, maybe. Storm, like a snowstorm.
Yes, STORM.
Mm-hmm.
And they moved to, I think that they were living in Snohomish, Washington when she passed away. And,
Is that where they made their home?
yes, in
Most
that
of-
area.
In that area.
Mhm.
Okay.
And Clara Lee was the next, and I don't know when she was born, and then I don't know when she passed away, but she married Adolph Olson, and I believe they had 6 children.
And did they live around in this area?
They lived in Tumalo, Oregon, that's near Bend, and raised a family there. And then he had a homestead on the head of Elk Creek, and they moved from there back